Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku was born with flames. If you guys enjoy this movie, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story sleepyoongs from AO3. So let's start the video. Izuku was 4 today, and today should be a happy day. He learns when he could possibly gain his quirk. What his quirk possibly could be, the young child had already made so many theories on what it could be. He hoped it was flashy, just like All Might. Also just as strong as All Might. After all, he wanted to be just like All Might. Brave and saving people with a big smile on his face. His mom, Inko, and his dad, were just as excited as him, though Izuku could say his dad's excitement was almost beating his. And the silly man already had his quirk. The quirk was fire-breathing, with the mutation of him having scales of a dragon along with retractable claws. Izuku, he thought that was cool. His dad had a powerful quirk. And it was flashy. He would have made a great hero, but Izuku remembered that his dad said he'd rather stick to working for the heroes, which is why he is an quirk researcher. His mom's quirk, though not as strong, nor flashy, Izuku thinks it's still really cool. She has telekinesis, or, in simpler terms, she can move smaller objects if she pleases. It's an everyday quirk, that she doesn't think is special. But Izuku, he thinks every quirk is special. It makes you, you. Just like his best friend's, Katsuki, quirk that just came in not too long ago. It was explosions, and Izuku thinks it's amazing. Midoriya Izuku, the nurse, called his name, and Izuku was shaking with his own excitement by this point. He knew, he had a big, dopey, grin on his face as he squeezed his favorite All Might toy that was in hand. He could feel his dad place a firm hand on top of his shoulder, as the black-haired man smiled at him, encouraging him silently to move along. Izuku ran, and his parents called out to him, with his mother having a worried tone, and his dad sounding exasperated. The nurse who was waiting at the door looked down at him with amusement, as she shook her head. "Eager, aren't you, honey?" she asked, and Izuku bobbled his head with a shy smile. It was around this time, both of his parents caught up to him. "Izuku, dear, you know you can't run off like that," his mother scolded lightly, as she took his hand. Perhaps to keep him from running off once again. Izuku just gave an apologetic look towards Inko, as he slowly nodded his head. Izuku felt less energetic now, but he was still excited to know his quirk. He had so many possibilities of what his quirk could be. He could have a fire quirk, or even better, a dragon quirk. He could have a mix of his parents' quirk, which be amazing. Izuku could have the ability to breathe fire, but unlike his dad, he will be able to manipulate it. Or maybe he will have all control of any fire, or he will just have a stronger version of his mother's quirk. He's fine with that too. As long as he can be a hero, Izuku is happy. It wasn't long until a doctor came, and the doctor came with a picture of the X-ray of his toe to determine first, if he will have a quirk or not. Izuku was now, on the edge on his seat as he watched the doctor set up the pictures and make his way to his seat. Though, for whatever strange reason, the doctor didn't have a smile on his face. He didn't even look happy. He almost looked sad. Izuku felt confused, as he tilted his head at the doctor. "Hello Midoriya-kun, my name is Dr. Chinen. I have come here to tell you the news of your X-ray," and well, Chinen had cleared his throat, as he pointed at a toe in the picture. Izuku didn't understand it, but his parents seemed to have, just from how his father's never-ending smile had wiped away instantly, and his mother had gave a upset, and worried, frown to this. "To put it frank, your son is quirkless. We ran the X-ray 3 times to see if it was just an mess up on our side, seeing as a quirkless child in this generation is just unheard of." Quirkless. He was quirkless. Izuku, his favorite All Might toy, fell to the ground as his body lulled. He could feel how his mouth went dry as his eyes went wide with clear, burning, tears started to overrun his vision. He was quirkless. His mind repeated, as his breaths went short. He could hear his mother talking. Asking how it was even possible when she had a quirk and his dad had such a strong quirk gene. The only answer the doctor had was a shrug. Izuku gave a whimper, as he leaned into his mother's, warm, side who accepted him with an loving embrace. "Oh Izuku, it'll be okay, we can stop for ice cream after this. And go over to Katsuki's." "No," a harsh, cold, cutting tone of his father's voice interrupted his mother. His mother tightened his grip on him, as she stared at the man with wild eyes. "What? No, what do you mean no Hisa?" I said no, let's just go home. "Thank you doctor for your time." The doctor didn't say a word. He only left the room. The frosty, rigid, atmospheric room. Izuku learned early on, being quirkless was a death sentence. That, if he truly wanted to survive, if he wanted to be a hero, that he couldn't look at the world so black and white. There was an dark gray area. And a gray area that he is currently living in. One that no one talk about since he is quirkless. Since, on the outside looking in, he has the perfect family. A strong working father who is more than well respected in the business world. A doting mother who loves her son despite the disability he has. He has a best friend who, despite everything, stays around and even sticks up for him. His life, for a quirkless person, is too good to be true. He has no reason to complain, he would be a brat if he did so. He tried it once, and it only got him in trouble with the law since they saw him as an ungrateful son. Izuku gave a tired laugh as he twisted the wrapper off the candy he managed to snag with the little money he gets. It was a yellow lollipop, that really tasted like 𝐓𝐡, but Izuku had nothing better to eat. He couldn't afford to buy the cheap food, nor if he tried to save up his money. Dad would just steal it from him. It was just better to spend it as soon as he got it. "One day, your teeth is going to rot out." Deku footsteps could be heard coming up next to him. Izuku only lazily looked to the side of him, as he rested to yellow lollipop in the pocket of his left cheek and gave a shrug. "Maybe the coming infection will kill me. It'll be a blessing in disguise." Izuku sarcastically rolled his eyes as he said this. His best friend gave a bitter huff that sounded like it was meant to be a laugh. Though, there hasn't been much laughter between the two of them. Not since they were younger. When they were dumber. More naive and still had hope for the world. For heroes. And part of Izuku still does have hope for heroes. But not to be saved. He isn't a helpless princess in distress. Though, he had hoped that they acknowledge the fact things like this goes on. That as good as they are also bad. They also create the things they set out to get rid of, villains. The life Izuku is living. The life Katsuki is living. It's what turns others to the dark side when they realize no one is going to truly help them. It hurts to accept. To think about. So they want to make those who let them sit there in their pain feel it too. And, on a certain scale, Izuku can understand. And, maybe later on in life, he might snap and go crazy if he isn't already crazy. He still has that heroic drive to help those who suffered like him. Katsuki lightly shook him, with devilish red-locking eyes viridian green. Izuku merely raised a brow, wondering what the ashen-haired teen could want. "We need to get home," the words were simple. But they meant so much. Izuku just grunted in acknowledgement, as he took the yellow sucker and tossed it to ground, with the sound of it shattering could be heard in the far distance as he started to walk off with Katsuki not too long after. "My son isn't quirkless Inko. I refuse to accept this abomination." It was supposed to be a simple family dinner, Izuku remembered. After the doctor's visit, things between his father and him were tense and uncomfortable, but Izuku just thought the man needed time to breathe. Time to calm down. He gave his dad that time. His mom was acting the same, if not a little more sad and empathetic towards him. She played with him more. She had tried to smile more. She had watched All Might's debut video despite her not liking it. She even baked him cookies despite his father's angry protest of him being a bad boy and not deserving any. Even for the family dinner, she made him katsudon, let him have another cookie, and allowed him to have his drink with dinner rather than after. Even though his dad was mad at her for doing so. His mom just stood up with a smile, and told Hisashi that he, Izuku, deserved to be a somewhat spoiled after the saddening news of having no quirk. His father disagreed. Izuku saw the way thick, gray, smoke had poured from his father's mouth like a faucet. He saw the way how angry specks of orange had started to jump from his mouth the more he listened to his mom talk positively about him. It didn't take long for his father to erupt with anger and yell at his mother. Yell at him. For an argument to break out. Izuku, baby, please go to your room. No, he can sit here and listen how he got his mother's weak quirk genes. How he will never be a hero and will die before he is 18 either because someone killed him or suicide. You hear that, son? You are worthless. Izuku felt hot tears pour from his eyes, as he stared at his father in a mixture of confusion and a heartbroken expression. He didn't understand why his dad hated him so much because he didn't have a quirk. It didn't make sense. Just a few hours ago, his dad told him he'd love him forever. That nothing will change that fact. Did he lie to him? Izuku let out a whimper as his mother was quick to snatch him into her arms, hiding him away from the world. I think you need to get out, Hisashi. His mother's tone was low, devoid of any true emotions as her grip clutched harder the louder he sobbed. He could hear how his father scoffed, but left without a fight. Izuku held on to his mother like his life depended on it. Like she would disappear if he ever let go. And, he could say a part of him was scared she would. Everything was going so bad and so fast, Izuku just wanted to wake up from this horrible nightmare he was having. We're home, Izuku called out to a cold, and seemingly empty house. Izuku, he knew that his mother was here. She was always home nowadays with her mostly in her bedroom, sprawled out on the bed with the TV buzzing for background noise. His mom wouldn't be particularly asleep, but she might as well be. It has been years since he truly seen her full of life. Seen her happy. She was just a walking shell of a person, just waiting to die. Just waiting for someone, anyone at this point, to kill her. She always has the same dead, far away, stare in her once vibrant emerald eyes. And Izuku, he blames his father for that. On most days, he has thoughts he feels guilty for, but he just couldn't help but to wonder why the man just didn't kill her. He has blood on his hands, and he isn't afraid of hurting his mom. Hisashi has on multiple occasions beat her to near death to only send her off to some sketchy-looking hospital or call in some weird-looking men that took his mother away and brought her back healed. Izuku knew he should be grateful. After all, Izuku at least has his mother alive. Katsuki lost his at 5 due to his own father proving a point. But, he couldn't help but to feel angry. His mother is just suffering. She isn't mentally alive. She barely eats. She hardly comes out the room, and when she does, it's because of Hisashi and it's because of him wanting to hurt her more. Izuku knows it's not fun for him anymore to hurt 𝐀𝐦. But, he knows he'll get more satisfaction out of his reaction rather than his mother's. And that's the point that makes Izuku absolutely livid. Hisashi's not here. 𝐴𝐻. Izuku's side glanced at Katsuki as he made his way to the kitchen. Watch your cursing, Kaken, Izuku murmured. It was a rule. One of many rules that his father has set in place for them to follow, and, one of many if they break they will get punished for. Yeah, whatever. Need some help with making dinner? You're supposed to clean the living room. Don't make things harder on the both of us. The Ashen teen didn't talk back, instead he walked off and sighed. Izuku didn't turn his head to see what Katsuki was doing. Izuku just could only hope his brother would finish before Hisashi arrived within the next hour. It was a week later Izuku remembered seeing his father come back. And it was a week later Izuku remembered what true hell felt like. His father was apologetic for the things he said during dinner. For how he acted. Izuku being 4, he accepted his father. He just wanted the man back in his life. Especially since he even came back with a gift. And not just any gift, an limited edition All Might figurine Izuku had been seeing on TV and had been wanting. He was more than happy to accept his dad's apology. His mom though, not so much. She was hesitant. She didn't want him back in his life. But she allowed it. And, everything was fine for the most part for a few weeks. His father took him to ice cream shops and bought him the biggest ice creams that he ever had. He remembered going shopping with his father, and ended up with more toys. More hero merch. And, during those few weeks, 𝐬𝐸𝐬 was so happy. He even forgotten the horrid words that his father spat out during dinner that night. But like all good things, they come to an end. And 𝐬𝐸𝐬 at the age of 4, also learned this harsh lesson. Honey, 𝐴𝐸 got paged for an emergency at work. Are you and 𝐬𝐸𝐬 going to be okay for a few hours? 𝐴𝐸𝐬 asked, with a worried frown. He could see his father wave her off, grinning brightly as he normally does. It put his mother at some sort of ease. Don't you worry, think of this as some sort of father-son bonding. Right, 𝐸𝐲? Right, 𝐬𝐸𝐬 agreed noncommittally as he made the All Might figurine fly in the air and crash into one of his dolls that played the role of a villain. Hisashi just chuckled, as 𝐴𝐸𝐬 smiled warmly at him. Okay then, I'll be back soon as possible, boys. Oh. And remember, leftovers are in the fridge. His mother was gone out the door on that last note. 𝐬𝐸𝐬 absent-mindedly played, but he could hear his father shuffling behind him. 𝐬𝐸𝐬 paid no mind to this. The man probably was hungry, after all his mom did mention leftovers. It probably was close to dinner time. He thinks. He wasn't all that great with telling time just yet. It wasn't long until he heard his father's footsteps coming back. 𝐬𝐸𝐬, he this time looked up at his dad with wonder and curiosity of what the man was up to. He was gone for a short time, but he had a mischievous smile that was on his face that meant he was up to something. The little boy frowned, as he tilted his head. Daddy, what are you doing? 𝐬𝐸𝐬 asked, and Hisashi lowly laughed with him crouching down to match his height. Something felt off to 𝐬𝐸𝐬. He wasn't sure what it was. He wasn't sure if it was the look in his father's deep, brown eyes, or how dangerously close he was that he could smell the ashy breath of the man. 𝐬𝐸𝐬 wasn't sure, but he knew he had a sudden urge to back away and cry. And he hasn't felt like this about his father since he was diagnosed quirkless. 𝐬𝐸𝐬, son, wanna play a game? The question was innocent and it had 𝐬𝐸𝐬's interests piqued. A game? What game? Oh. Are we playing heroes and villains? No, nothing like that, son. We are gonna play hide and seek with a twist, his father said with small jazz hands, as 𝐬𝐸𝐬 blinked slowly. He haven't played hide and seek in a while. The other kids at the preschool were slowly, but surely, avoiding him. The only other person that seemed to stick by his side was Katsuki, who screamed at the others that if they think him being quirkless was a disease, then they were stupid. What's the twist? 𝐬𝐸𝐬 asked, as Hisashi gave a smile. A crooked, twisted smile as he laughed and stood up. Now my boy, it wouldn't be a twist if it told you, would it? You go hide and I'll count to 30. Be silent and hide good. Okay, Daddy. 𝐬𝐸𝐬 ran off, not noticing the crazed and lethal tone his father took. If 𝐬𝐸𝐬 did, he probably would have realized that Hisashi's version of hide and seek was far from normal. That it was far from innocent. If 𝐬𝐸𝐬 did, he would have noticed something was wrong. That he needed help. But he didn't. And at the age of 4, 𝐬𝐸𝐬 learned his first lesson of needing to be quiet. Welcome home, Dad, 𝐬𝐸𝐬 said, as he finished setting up the table. 𝐬𝐸𝐬, he could tell his father wasn't happy just from the way the smoke protruded throughout the house, making strong to breath. 𝐬𝐸𝐬 let out a choking cough within his hands as he closed one eye, watching his father storm past Katsuki, who was frozen in his place just by a simple stare from the man. Stop coughing. If you can't handle a little smoke, how are you going to be a hero? Tch. You'll probably die if a bug touch you. 𝐬𝐸𝐬 just weakly smiled, as he served his father. Do as father says. If he says stop, you listen. If you don't do so, you will get punished. 𝐬𝐸𝐬 learned this the strong way many times, as did Katsuki, who liked to talk back to his father. Who liked to put the man in his place despite knowing he couldn't fight him. Katsuki wanted to protect him from the monster who dare call himself human. It's bland. You look like your mother, but you can't do a 𝐡 like her. A flying plate full of food was thrown towards him. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 barely ducked down to only have his hair being forcefully gripped, and his neck being snapped up to make him face his father's angry deep brown eyes. His father was out smoke, as his teeth gritted together. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 could tell, it was one of those days. And, from the corner of his eyes, he could see Katsuki struggling to fight the urge to snatch him away from the prying hands of his father. Katsuki knows, it'll make things worse. After all, he's done it before. And it didn't end well for the both of them. Who said you could just dodge, his father hissed, as fire blended with the smoke that was rapidly pouring from his breath. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 felt the heat on his face, he could feel the sweat start to build up and tickle down his forehead. I asked you a question, 𝐬𝐡𝐢. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 found himself being thrown onto the floor and his father towering over him. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 opened his mouth, before he shut it as quickly as he opened it. He didn't have an answer, and that was worse than having some sort of lie. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 felt his hands start to tremble, he glanced at Katsuki who was about to jump in and help, and he was quick to shake his head. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 didn't need his brother in trouble. His father was in a bad mood, and apparently wanted to take it out on him. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 can handle it, he wanted to handle it. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 let out a shaky breath, as brought his arms around his form. Hisashi had more fire than smoke that was pouring out of his mouth. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 could feel his father's fire start to scorch his skin for every second he took longer to answer. And for every second he took, the fire grew bigger and bigger, until he could feel his skin start start to boil under the heating pressure of the fire. I don't know, 𝐬𝐡𝐢's voice gave a gasp as he whispered. Though, that answer didn't satisfy his father at all. If anything, it made him more angry. 𝐬𝐡𝐢, he could see how his father's deep brown eyes turned feral as he twitched. And all 𝐬𝐡𝐢 remembered was Hisashi taking in a large breath, and opening his mouth before seeing a hot, bright light that glowed red before he had let out a gut-wrenching scream. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 remembered, coming back to preschool after the first time his father hit him, was strong. Not because he still couldn't understand why Hisashi would hurt him. Why Hisashi would stage the fact he did hurt him, as some sort of minor accident and inconvenience, and the fact his mother for the most part, begrudgingly accepted that Hisashi was telling the truth. For now. No, it was strong for him to hide the faint charring marks that littered his small body from his father fire coming a bit too close to his skin. And the bruises that he gained on his wrist from when his father found him, and had the sickly sweet grin on his smile as he dragged 𝐬𝐡𝐢 out of his hiding spot. And the small swelling of his cheek, that still have the bruising hand mark of his father smacking him to the ground due to his anger. Due to him being angry that 𝐬𝐡𝐢 lost the game. It was his very first punishment, and 𝐬𝐡𝐢 took it to heart. He wanted to tell his mom. But, Hisashi deep brown eyes always laid heavy on him. Always had that dangerous, wild glint in them, just waiting for the right second to attack. Just waiting for him to slip up. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 never did though. Hisashi had left him alone for the rest of the weekend. Deku. Why do you look like that? And the heck happened to you? 𝐬𝐡𝐢 had gave a flinch as he stared up at his best friend's red eyes. The red eyes were so close to his father's crazed and feral ones he saw during the weekend. For a moment, it scared 𝐬𝐡𝐢. He knew, it was just Katsuki. That Katsuki wouldn't hurt him despite his brash, loud, and bold personality. After all, he's stuck with him throughout his quirklessness. He's turned away bullies and tried cursing out adult figures as much as a 4-year-old could without it being amusing or just seeming cute. Accident, 𝐬𝐡𝐢 told the same lie his dad did. His mom believed it. There shouldn't be no reason Katsuki shouldn't, and, for a moment Katsuki stared at him before he barked out a boisterous laugh. Be more careful, Deku. Dawn need ya dead before we become heroes. The Ashen boy lead the way to their adventures, while his laughter carried out throughout the playground. 𝐬𝐡𝐢 smiled weakly to this, as he followed his best friend without any hesitation. I'll try Kaken. Move out of the way, boy, before I have to remove you. A tall man spoke in a flat and monotonous tone that shown no true emotions. His muted, seemingly black, eyes shared the way how his face held a frosty, aloof stare as he towered over Katsuki. 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 lips only quirked into a ferocious snarl with his teeth in a bare and throaty rumbling growl that had passed his lips as he held onto his best friend's burnt body. At the moment, 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 didn't look like a 13-year-old boy. 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬, he didn't even look human. He looked like a beast as he stared at the man who his mind screamed was a threat. And, 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬, he was willing to do anything to get rid of this threat. 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬, and you will die, that was a promise that he intended to keep. He wasn't going to let a shady man who smelt like cigarettes and alcohol touch 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬, who was dressed in a black 𝐓𝐻𝐢𝐬 trench coat that he knew held weapons under it. 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 had seen them before. And all of Hisashi's shady, suspicious, and mysterious men carried at least one weapon, whether it was a gun, a knife, or both. They always had it on them. 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 wouldn't let that man get near 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬. He already failed to protect his best friend, his brother, from Hisashi. He won't fail again. He can't fail. The man just laughed in his face like he told some sort of joke. The man gave a twisted grin, as he raised a brow and tilted his head. You kill me. Ha! I almost believed you for a second. Nice one, kid. The grin that was once on his face wiped away, as the man's face settled back into his passive and neutral stare. 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 just held 𝐬𝐻𝐢 closer to his chest, with his eyes narrowing into a wary glare. Enough jokes, brat, give me the 𝐓𝐡𝐢𝐬. The man reached for 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬. And 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 could feel his body move before he could truly think. That all he knew, his mind screamed danger. That every fiber of his being wanted to protect his brother that was nearly dead, if not dead already, on his lap. That 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐬 was suffering all because of what his 𝐓𝐡𝐢𝐬𝐬 of a father did to him. And this intruder wanted to take him away and do who knows what to him. And if 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬 let this intruder take him away, 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬, he knows won't see 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐬 anymore. It happened once to his mom. To his dad. And even to 𝐴𝐻𝐸, who, even if they live with her, she's just a breathing flesh bag, awaiting her time to truly come. 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬 knew. All he could hear was the pressuring ring that buzzed in his ear before his vision had turned a bloody, murderous, red. All right, boys, me and Mitsuki are going out. If you need anything, you know what to do, 𝐴𝐻𝐸 chirped with a bright and a velvety smile as she swung her bag over her shoulders. Hisashi just grinned at his wife as she walked out the door with Mitsuki after giving the instructions she set for them. 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬, he remembered how the old man of 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐬 was quick to let the grin of his fall flat once the gentle click of the door could be heard. There was a sudden shift in emotion, with his face settling with irritation as he huffed at the fact he had to be there. It was weird to 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬, especially since he never seen the man angry. He didn't think the man could get angry. 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬 thought he was like Auntie 𝐴𝐻𝐸, who wore her emotions on her sleeve and was had tended to be overly emotional. Who never had a negative emotion in her body. And that seemed to carry over to 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐬 too, which made the whole small family just seem wholesome and happy. But, staring at the spot that Hisashi was standing in not too long ago but had left to do whatever, 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬 had felt weird. He knew that it was perfectly fine to be upset. After all, he was always free with his emotions. Negative or not. His mom was too, along with his dad. Though, his negative ones came so few, that he was just mostly soft-spoken. But, he couldn't help but to feel off about Hisashi. Maybe his overactive 4-year-old brain is just playing tricks on him. Or maybe he has been spending too much time with 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐬, and now, 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 find the need to analysis every little thing. Whatever it is, 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬, he just knows, Hisashi Midoriya is a strange man. Your dad is weird, 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬, 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 had commented, and 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬 bristled with him tilting his head at the sudden statement. Well. Yeah. He is a little, 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 seemed uncomfortable talking about Hisashi. It was weird to 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬, especially since he usually talked non-stop about the man to the point 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 has to ask him to shut up. 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬, he practically worshipped his dad just as much if not more than All Might. Which, 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 honestly finds a bit impressive. Though, it seemed like the worship and admiration 𝐬𝐻𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬 once had, was dwindling as the days went on. And 𝐻𝐡𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬, he wished he knew when it started. And, the only thought he can think back to when it started, was when Izuku came to school, mysteriously hurt and on edge. But, Katsuki, he refused to believe Hisashi would hurt Izuku. That man had shown so much love and pride for Izuku that it nearly poured out of him like sunshine and rainbows. Katsuki was quick to let go of that thought with a twinge of guilt for even thinking that way about his uncle. It's not bad, just saying he's little weird. It's quirky, as Dad would say, Izuku only hummed, nodding his head mindlessly as he focused on his drawing that he was making. You know, it's bad to talk behind people's back. Katsuki gave a startled flinched, as he stared up to see Hisashi came back. This time, the man had his jacket on as if he was about to leave. He moved to put on his shoes before he moved to grab the spare keys. Katsuki knitted his brows as he watched Hisashi open the door, ready to leave without them. Dad, where are you going? 𝐶, can we go? The man scoffed, as he stared down at Izuku for a few seconds with a heavy stare before his dark brown eyes lit up as if he got a bright idea. A sweet smile passed on his lips, and he his head to the side. But aren't you two big boys, Izuku and Katsuki? You two can stay home alone for a few hours. Big boys can do it, and so can heroes. Think of it like a game. If you don't mess up the house, if I don't have to come home early, and if both Inko and Mitsuki is all clueless to this, you win. Katsuki didn't miss the way his best friend flinched at the mere mention of game as he gave a weak nod of his head, watching his dad leave out the door with an all-too-cheery hum. A list of questions rolled in Katsuki's head after the small exchange. But, he paused in asking when he saw Izuku's tear-filled eyes as he whispered under his breath, I'm so sorry, Kaken. Katsuki had more fears and concerns after that. Red. Pools of dark, crimson, red dripped from his hands. From his fingertips as he stared numbly down at the lifeless body. Katsuki knew, he should feel some sort of emotion other than nothing. Of pure blankness that weighed heavy in his chest. It tasted bitter in mouth at the fact he just didn't care. That he took a life, whether they were good or bad. He killed someone, but still he couldn't care. Katsuki let out a mirthless huff as his dulled red eyes fixed on Izuku, who was laid next to him. Faintly, Katsuki could see his erratic breaths rise up to only fall short. Izuku was alive, though, he was barely alive, and he wasn't sure how much longer Izuku could hold on. As it is, he was holding on by a thin string just ready to snap. That thought scared Katsuki, especially since he was unsure how to help him. He couldn't call the police here, he had a dead body in the house. And, he knew, the nearest hospital was too far to even try to walk to. Especially trying to carry Izuku there. Katsuki swallowed the ever-growing lump in his throat with tears that started to burn in his eyes. He couldn't lose his brother yet. Katsuki thought he understood pain. It was simple to him. Pain was having your favorite toys taken away from you when you were bad. Or, having no dessert or no spicy curry for dinner. Or even, on the rare occasion, having to sleep in the spare bedroom that had boring white walls. No hero posters. No toys. Nothing to entertain yourself with. Just a bed, a desk to do your homework with, and a window. Katsuki slept there once and hated it. But, he never truly understood pain. Not until the game he played with Hisashi and had lost. Losing came with a bad consequence. And that consequence left him tattered in stinging cuts. In bruises. It was a reminder, as Hisashi put it, to win. And it was also a lesson. To think smart. To be independent. Who cares that they were only 4 and should be able to depend on adults still? He learned quickly that smarter is always better, and if he wanted to trust someone. To never trust anyone. Even those you love. Katsuki wanted to challenge this logic. Izuku covered his mouth with a pleading look that shinned in his glossy eyes. He decided to let it go. For now. Izuku and him had lost the game by nearly burning down the house trying to cook for themselves. Hisashi had to rush home due to getting a call from the local police who had concerns. Hisashi had to make it back in time before Inko and Mitsuki, who also got the call. He also had to make up a bullshit lie that they were doing family cooking together, but it had gone wrong. Katsuki never been so disappointed to see the two women fall for such an obvious lie. But he didn't say anything. Not now. He only left with his mother with his own mixed emotions. Later that night, Katsuki had went to bed with a new thought crossing his mind about Izuku's father. Hisashi Midoriya wasn't simply a weird man. He was a lair. Someone. Please help us. Katsuki held his scarred brother on his back. It was nightfall, barely anyone was out. And if anyone was out, they dodged the two of the like the plague. It left Katsuki with a sour feeling of bitter hatred. Even more so than he was feeling before. Where was his hero swooping in to save him? And where was Izuku's hero saving him so he doesn't die? Katsuki, he tried so strong to stay hopeful. He tried so strong. After all, in just a couple of years, they will be able to go to you. But Katsuki isn't sure if he can go anymore. Katsuki killed a man. Even if the man was going to hurt them, he still killed the man. And he didn't stop after the man was done breathing. Katsuki, he mauled his face. He exploded his body until he was just simply blood splatters and chunks of what used to be a human body. Katsuki decapitated the man and, he can't even say he feels the smallest grain of remorse. In fact, Katsuki could say he feels proud. Not the fact he killed someone, but the fact he stood up to a threat. That even if it wasn't Hisashi, he still dealt with Hisashi. And Katsuki is proud of himself for not being weak anymore. He's been too weak for too long. Hey kids, are you too Oka? Oh my god, a feminine voice instantly drew in his attention. He could see a black-haired female who was dressed in a hero suit. She started to approach them, though, her eyes went wide at the sight of them. Possibly because his brother's possibly lifeless body that was limp on his back. And the fact his clothing was soaked in blood from head to toe. Even his once ashen hair was packed down with a muddy, dirty, brown that was crusted up with old dry blood though, the hero woman seemed to push past that and came over immediately. What happened? And is he alive? She was already pulling out her phone possibly to call an ambulance or the police. Katsuki bit the urge to tell her not to. It was best for his brother. If he could get help faster that way, then so be it. And if Katsuki ends up going to jail afterwards, it was worth it. Barely, the woman nodded her head, with a sigh. Katsuki saw her look at his brother, before down the street, as she muttered something that wasn't for him to hear her say. This is breaking so many protocols. Before Katsuki knew it, his brother was resting comfortably and securely in her back as he was in her side. Before he knew it, they were soaring across the rooftops. Katsuki found out he was saved by the heroine Midnight not too much longer after she took them to a hospital. She had a lot of questions, but her main concern was saving his brother. Saving Izuku. Her concern also fretted over to him, with her occasionally asking him if he was okay. It was weird to Katsuki, and he had a lot of emotions rising in him. Some were negative, such as irritation. Such as an irrational anger that fueled his lasting hate. He also had neutral feelings of just confusion on why she was worried and so concerned over two children she has no information about. Midnight saw the blood on him, and she must have knew that it wasn't his. That he did something. Yet, she seemed like she didn't care. Or, that she knew something deeper was going on. It was strange. Midnight was strange. And, Katsuki, he wasn't sure how to feel about that. The last adult he thought was strange or weird, ended up being an abuser. Being a manipulative lair. Being a murder. Katsuki, he doesn't trust strange people anymore, no matter if it's their quirky or supposed lovable personality. All of it's just a facade waiting to crack at the right moment. Sweetheart, do you have anyone you can call that you can go home to for the night? Friends or any family? Midnight asked, her tone sounding too doting. Too maternal. Even her baby blue eyes were soft. Caring. Full of patience as he just stared at her, trying to understand her. Understand her logic. Understand why this hero is still here. She did her job of saving them, now she can go. Katsuki is grateful, he said his thanks to her when they got to the hospital. So why is she still here? No. He flatly said, his eyes returning to the floor. She just sighed, as she gave a short nod of her head. It was almost as if she understood. Katsuki almost gave a scoff at that thought. Her pity won't give her points. It will only create a bigger monster inside of him that was growing steadily every day. Every second. It was only waiting to snap once more. Then, while your bother is in surgery, at least come with me and take a shower. Katsuki almost protested, but Midnight gave a smile, as she held up a hand. You're covered in blood, honey. Don't you dare tell me you are comfortable in that. Katsuki shut his mouth as he glared at the poor ground once again, choosing to ignore her teasing tone. He didn't want to leave Izuku. He can stay uncomfortable for a few hours. He'll be fine. But the heroine thought otherwise, as she tilted her head at him and gave a curious look towards him. If it makes you feel better, my place is only 10 minutes away. We wouldn't be far. Plus you walking around like you committed a crime is a no-go. Midnight gave a knowing look in her baby blue eyes that practically glowed at saying this. Katsuki nearly gave a flinch, as he curled into himself. He didn't want to know what she knew. He was scared to even ask for her to reply back saying he's under arrest. He couldn't ask. He wouldn't ask. Katsuki could only shakily let out a breath, as he gripped the arm of the cheap, plastic chair as he let the choking words pass his lips. Fine. I'll go. Leave Izuku alone. Katsuki screamed, as he defended his best friend with his own body. He remembered, this was the first time Hisashi had truly lashed out at them. Katsuki didn't know what caused it. What triggered it? All he knew, there was a silent moment between all three of them. That he and Izuku was playing the typical game of heroes versus villains, and that as soon as Izuku was lab-led the hero, the man snapped. He remembered how the room started to fill with the thick, ashy fumes. How all Katsuki could see was the unhinged deep brown eyes of Hisashi's that practically glowed a toxic red. He remembered how the man's breaths turned harsh. Turned erratic. He was like a wild animal, and, all Katsuki knew, seconds later he threw Izuku to the wall. He heard the way his best friend hit the wall with a painful thud, before his small body slid down, with him letting out a out in pain. Hisashi stalked over to Izuku with his fingers twitching and his lips quirked into a cruel smile. Katsuki's feet moved faster than his mind could truly process. Within the passing seconds, Katsuki felt a gliding fist that hit him directly in his nose, earning a sickening crack. He could feel a warm, ticking, liquid drip from his nose that had a heavy smell of iron and metallic. Katsuki bit his bottom lip with stinging tears that glossed his red eyes. He felt the hot pain of his broken nose, but Katsuki refused to cry. He refused to give Hisashi more satisfaction than he already has. Leave Izuku alone. Katsuki gritted his teeth at the older male standing in front of him. Hisashi gave an amused sound as the man tilted his head with his brown eyes lighting up like Christmas Day. Oh. And what are you going to do? He purred, with a leveling look that made Katsuki jerk back. I'll tell Auntie. And we'll go to the heroes. Hisashi merely let out a laugh as he smirked. Katsuki didn't like the deadly look in his eyes. He didn't like the way he crouched down to his height, nor the way he got so close to him that his smoggy scent was all Katsuki could smell. And Katsuki, he didn't like the way the man held him still, as he started to whisper in his ear. Know your place, brat. Kids are kids and shouldn't be an adult's business. This is your only warning. If you step out of being just a kid, I will do something you won't like. Hisashi backed away, his smile was sweet. It was gentle. And it was too innocent for the words he just said. Understood. Katsuki only nodded, with no words able to form. Izuku was alive, but forced to be in a medical-induced sleep. Katsuki knows, he should be happy. That, he should be weeping tears of joy. Yet, when he looks down at Izuku who looked too frail, too pale, too scarred, he couldn't help but to feel a hopelessness that clung tightly to his chest. At the very moment, the only way his brother was alive, was because of all the machines and IVs the doctors have plugged to his skin. And, 𝐀𝐦, as he stared at his brother who laid there in an unresponsive state, he couldn't help but to place the blame on himself. If only he was faster. If only he took the path of fire for Izuku. If only he did better. His mind whispered, as he turned away from the sight of his brother. He left the room, with hopelessness and guilt that was his shadow. It followed him, with it growing bigger as the light casted brighter onto him. 𝐀𝐦-kun, do you want to talk about what happened that led to you ending up wandering in the street late at night, asking for help? Midnight asked, as she sat out hot, smoking tea for the two of them before she slid into the seat with an encouraging smile. 𝐀𝐦, since last night, stayed with the hero. He tried to understand why she would take him in, rather than toss him away into some sort of orphanage, or tried to take him back home, or even at the very least, why she didn't call the police yet. She only smiled, and told him that she has her reasons for not telling them just yet. It was different for 𝐀𝐦. He haven't felt that sort of motherly warmth roll off of anyone since 𝐀𝐦. And 𝐀𝐦, she isn't around anyone. At least mentally. It made it strong to decide to trust her. She was hero. She's been kind to him and had saved his brother. And now, she's going out her way to help him. Yet, at the same time, when 𝐀𝐦 tried to trust her, there was a blockage that left a barrier between the two of them. That made him feel overly cautious of the hero woman. Someone tried to take Izuku and 𝐀𝐦 picked up the tea, as he took a shaky drink. Midnight didn't press for answers, she only waited for him to continue or say he couldn't go on. She even reached out to him, with her hand hovering just above his hand, with her silently asking to touch him. For a few moments, 𝐀𝐦 stared at her, but he relented and nodded. He could feel the warmness and gentleness of her hand lightly touching his in a comforting way. It was strange to 𝐀𝐦, and he wasn't sure he liked it. But he didn't hate it. It brought back memories of his mother touching him gently. Of her hugging him and giving forehead for a moment. 𝐀𝐦 vision blurred, as he felt the constricting in his chest from the memories of his mother. He missed her, even if he wasn't around her for a long time, he still missed her. 𝐀𝐦-kun, Midnight called out, and 𝐀𝐦 merely rubbed the tears out of his eyes. "I'm fine," 𝐀𝐦 murmured with a pause and a shuddering breath. It was harder to admit than he expected. He thought it would be as simple as saying the words, "I did it," but it was harder. He felt his tongue go heavy, as he curled his hands into a tight fist. I killed them. I wanted to keep them away and Midnight gave his hand a light tap, as she stroked her thumb across his hand. 𝐀𝐦 glanced at her, to see her baby blue eyes were wearing a saddened and had an underlying understanding expression. There were no hint of disgust, of anger, or of fear. She seemed more so upset for him, than at him. And that was new. 𝐀𝐦, he didn't know how to react besides to just shut down. To pull away and look away from the all-too-caring expression the heroine was giving him. The first time 𝐀𝐦 found out about the abuse, was the first time Hisashi laid his hands on 𝐀𝐦. On his wife he claimed he loved so much. 𝐀𝐦 didn't witness it, but he remembered overhearing the late-night call from his mother. How angry his mother was, especially with the fact 𝐀𝐦 was staying with the man. She didn't have anywhere else to go, was the weak excuse 𝐀𝐦 made up. His mom told her to live with them, but 𝐀𝐦 had shot it down and told her she didn't want to put Izuku in this mess. 𝐀𝐦 wanted to come out of hiding spot then and there and tell 𝐀𝐦 and Mitsuki everything that Monster have been doing to them while they haven't been looking. But the threat of Hisashi rang loudly in his head. 𝐀𝐦, he could practically feel the man creeping behind him, with his callous hands gripping his shoulders as his hot breath blew in his ear, as he whispered, "Kids shouldn't be an adult's business." 𝐀𝐦 tried to go back to bed after that, but he only blankly stared at his All Might poster that mockingly told him to be strong. "You know I have to tell the police. I put it off for too long already, any longer it will complicate things." 𝐀𝐦 stared at the woman, who was cleaning up the teacups along with a few stray dishes. While he couldn't see her face, her tone was solemn. It was dour, sedate, and pensive as she quietly sighed. "I know," 𝐀𝐦 gave a taut reply, and Midnight only glanced back him. Her expression was unreadable, but Katsuki could tell she was upset though not at him. His brows furrowed to this. "They won't be easy on you," she stated, her tone turning more serious. Katsuki knew this. He knew once he uttered the words, "I killed someone," the police force won't see him as a helpless child. They would want to know everything from start to finish. For him to prove if he's truly innocent or just a villain in the making. Katsuki knows, he knows, that he has a higher chance of going to jail, of never seeing his brother again, just because of the one thing he did. But, he doesn't regret it. "I know," Katsuki repeated. This time, he stared her directly in her soft baby blue eyes. Midnight turned to face him while she gave a smile. The smile wasn't happy nor was it negative. It was just there, but yet it still filled Katsuki with a glowing warmth that being around Midnight seemed to give him. "They'll try to prove your innocence," she said, and Katsuki gave a baffled stare. He didn't understand why she was trying so strong for him. Midnight didn't even know for sure if he was innocent at all. Katsuki could be lying through his skin of his teeth and she still wanted to help him. Katsuki is almost certain that it's illegal to help a murder. Why? Why would you do that? I could be lying and you are just. Why are you helping me? What would you get out of it? Katsuki slammed his fist down onto the table, demanding for answers that he didn't have. Midnight just shook her head, as she raised her hands up in defense. "Nothing, Katsuki-kun. It's what heroes do, what a decent human being do," she spoke softly, as she gave a leveling gaze that felt kind. That felt too trusting. He hated it as much as he loved it. "You don't know if I'm telling the truth, though," Katsuki whispered, while he stared away from Midnight, who at one point came to his side. She rested a gentle hand on top of his shoulder, as she spoke gently with a credence smile playing on her lips. "Call it hero intuition. Katsuki, 𝐬𝐻𝐭 is staying with us for a few weeks. Please. No questions, just be nice." Katsuki eyed his mother, who held 𝐬𝐻𝐭 in her arms. He could see, his best friend was quivering in her arms as he hid away from the world. His mom was quick to set 𝐬𝐻𝐭 down to the ground, though not without stealing an embrace from his forehead before she left the room. Katsuki took the chance to stalk over to his clearly scared and shaken friend. He wasn't sure what was wrong, just that something clearly happened that Auntie Inko sent 𝐬𝐻𝐭 off. "What happened?" Katsuki asked, and 𝐬𝐻𝐭's eyes stared up at him. He was pale. A sickly, unnatural, pale, with the only color on him was the red botches that was on his cheek. It concerned Katsuki to see 𝐬𝐻𝐭 in such a vulnerable state. Dad tried to a broken cry past 𝐬𝐻𝐭's lips as he collapsed onto the floor. He curled into a ball and buried his face into his lap, allowing racking, loud sobs to course through him and shake his small form. Katsuki didn't ask any more questions after that. He just sat next to his friend, and held him as he cried. "State your name for the record, please." Katsuki sat in a stuffy, minimally lit up room. The room held only one big glass that he couldn't see out of, but he knew that Midnight and a few other pros and officers stood out there. The police placed on his hands a cold, metal, quirk-suppressed cuffs that were tight on his wrist that he knew, bruising was bound to come later. But, Katsuki, he's dealt with worse. If he can't handle a uncomfortable handcuff for a couple hours, he deserves to be thrown in jail. "Bakugo, Midoriya Katsuki," he told the detective, who nodded his head and wrote in his notepad. The detective's dull and dark eyes stared into his red and muted ones. "Tell me if any of this information is wrong or right." "Okay, Katsuki-san." The detective took a pause as he pulled out a cream-colored folder. "Age, 13. Quirk, explosion. Both mother and father are deceased and you are currently in the care of the Midoriyas. Is this correct?" The folder was sat down, as the detective asked him while Katsuki held in the building quail from the mention of his parents. On most days, he tried not to remember the fact they were truly gone. That maybe one day, they would come back to him. On most days, it didn't work. It only left him with a black hole in his bleeding heart with nothing to truly fill it. "That's correct." Katsuki's tone was frosty. His tone was stony. As he held an aloof stare at the detective who did nothing more to write in the notepad of his. Tell me what happened that led you to midnight, the detective asked him, and Katsuki unhesitantly answered. He had nothing to hide, he was just tired at this point. So tired. Midoriya Hisashi, my adoptive father, burnt my brother, Midoriya Izuku, with his fire. He left him to die and sent over one of his creepy men to take Izuku. I didn't want that to happen to Izuku. He wasn't going to come back. I just wanted to protect him, which led me to killing the man. The tiny room, if possible, felt more closed in. More like a tight box as Katsuki finished speaking. Everything to Katsuki felt suffocating, narrow, and uncomfortable. The detective took a pregnant pause, as his breath seemingly taken away. He could see the apprehensive stare in his dark eyes, as he let out a breaking sigh. If I can ask, how do you know the man was going to take your brother away? Katsuki leaned in, as he gave a leveling gaze towards the detective. There are a lot of men that work for Hisashi, I've seen a lot. But there are 3 main men that you know what they do. It was true, Katsuki seen all sort of faces that came around during his childhood. But there was always the main ones Hisashi's relied on. The ones Katsuki knew from the way walked and to the way they breathed. And the ones Katsuki grew to loathe with every fiber of his being. Katsuki knew them, Izuku knew them, Inko knew them, both his mother and father knew them. In their own way, all of them met the main men. Can you elaborate? The detective asked. Katsuki simply nodded as he fell back in his chair, taking the chance to look up at the bland ceiling. It was a dark gray, with a simple light that had shined down on him. It only really added to the dreary feel. Hisashi had men that broke you, men to heal, and men to kill. There was a beat of a silence, before a quiet click came from the detective turning off the recorder. I see. Thank you for your cooperation, Katsuki-san. It was late at night, Katsuki remembered. His mom was softly crying with the lights dimmed in the living room. Katsuki knew he should be in bed, that he shouldn't be seeing this right now. But, Katsuki, he couldn't sleep. Not with the nightmares that invaded his once sweet dreams. He wondered what happened to his mom, to have her cry. She was usually one to keep her emotions strong. To deal with problems as they came, and be a leader. She wasn't one to break down due to a stressful situation. It was concerning to see his mother in such a state. Katsuki hated it. He wanted her happy. He wanted her to smile. He didn't want her like this. Katsuki chose to come out of his hiding spot, as he made himself known. He was quick to run over to the woman and try and hug her. Though, he could only really hug her leg. Why are you crying? That question only seemed to make her give a trembling cry as she brought her fingers throughout his hair. Katsuki stared up at his mom, who wore a watery smile on her face. It's a lot going on, Katsuki, and I don't want to drag you in it, baby, she softly whispered, as she was quick to scoop him in her arms and hold him close. Do you mean about Auntie Inko? And Katsuki abruptly cut himself off at the thought of saying Hisashi. He didn't see the man as an uncle nor his family. Family was supposed to love each other, yet, Hisashi made it clear he didn't love him. Didn't love Inko. Didn't love Izuku. He hurts them, and he even hurts Katsuki when he gets the chance to. He still has the yellow bruises, the faint scars. He still has nightmares, and still can hear the heavy voices of his in his ear, constantly telling him what to do. It still scares Katsuki. It makes him feel weak when he tries to be a hero and save his best friend. Save his auntie. Save his own self. Katsuki, I have a question. His mother seemed worried. She seemed even more stressed. Katsuki didn't like that one bit. Yes, Mama, he asked, with a head tilt. His mom gently held his arm, as she gave a grim expression. Has Hisashi ever hurt you? Mitsuki asked, and waited for an answer. Katsuki almost said yes. He almost told her all the things that Hisashi has said and done to both him and Izuku behind her back. But, he could feel the ghostly whispers of Hisashi telling him kids shouldn't be an adult's business. No, Mama, Katsuki lied with an innocent, clueless smile on his lips. We need to go back to that house, my house. Auntie Inko is still there. I just left her. We need to. Midnight, we have to find her, 𝐀𝐦 in his own stressed, erratic rage, forgot 𝐀𝐻. Someone who he swore to protect like he does for his brother, 𝐬𝐻𝐸. 𝐀𝐦, he knew, 𝐀𝐻 was still in that lonesome room of hers, and not ever witnessing a single thing that transpired in nearly 2 days ago. Yet, that also meant she wasn't being cared for. That she could be in the hands of anyone at the moment. That he left her out in the open for the wolves to snatch her up and attack without any care. 𝐀𝐦 felt his stomach recoil in worry while fresh, hot, bubbling tears start to burn in his eyes. He couldn't lose 𝐀𝐻, she was basically the only parental and motherly figure he clung onto for dear life. Sure, it might be selfish, but 𝐀𝐦 knew without Auntie 𝐀𝐻, life would be absolute hell. She was a fighter, and she fought until she couldn't fight no more. She did all she could for 𝐬𝐻𝐸 and him. She took him in. She protected him from Hisashi's wrath and rampages. She still cared for him even when she was bloodied and bruised. 𝐀𝐦 couldn't live without 𝐀𝐻. She was the glue that held him and 𝐬𝐻𝐸 together, even if she wasn't around as much. I don't know if he'll be allowed in the house. If Mrs. Midoriya was in there, the police surely have her in custody at this point, Midnight spoke softly, and in a reassuring tone that fell flat to his ears. 𝐀𝐦 could hardly hold back the choking cry as he curled his trembling hands into a tight fist. 𝐀𝐦, he didn't care that the police wouldn't let him in his once home. He'd force his way if he needs to. He just needs to know if 𝐀𝐻 is okay, that's all he needs. Please Midnight, 𝐀𝐦 whispered with his head hung low and his voice quivering. The woman faltered, with a frown on her face. It wasn't long until she gave a quiet sigh, but gave a relentless shake of her head. All right, let's go. 𝐀𝐦 for nearly a month, haven't seen or heard from 𝐬𝐻𝐸. His best friend's lack of presence at school was worrying to him, yet, he didn't go to any adult. Not with Hisashi's whispers in his head that constantly scared him. That constantly kept him up at night. He refused to go to anyone for help. 𝐀𝐦, he didn't see his best friend until a late afternoon at school. It was a huge red flag for 𝐀𝐦 seeing as 𝐬𝐻𝐸 was almost never late to school. Auntie 𝐀𝐻 made sure of that. Though, 𝐀𝐦 knew with all of the things going on recently, that he wasn't late simply because 𝐬𝐻𝐸 didn't want to go to school or even a long doctor's appointment, which was the lame excuse he gave the teacher. No, it was deeper than that. Anyone with eyes can see that, but the extras in his class refused to look further than a late quirkless nobody. 𝐀𝐦 lowly growled, as he bent and snapped his pencil. Eyes turned to him, but no one said a thing. The teacher only gave him a disgruntled look, but didn't scold him. No one ever has the true guts to do so, they, as his mom says, tend to embrace his butt and groom him to be a hero. 𝐀𝐦, even with his 5-year-old mind, already finds himself agreeing to this. 𝐀𝐦. Are you okay? 𝐬𝐻𝐸 approached him, and he could tell that he was far from doing well. The freckled boy had a loud, yellow, bruise that was on his wrist that 𝐀𝐦 knew was from Hisashi pulling on him. 𝐀𝐦 also saw the faint burn scars littering higher and higher on his arms, and even some had trailed on his legs from when 𝐀𝐦 took a glance down. Though, even then, that wasn't the most obvious scar on him. A new one placed in the crook of his collarbone that wasn't well hidden. It was a bright, throbbing, red. Obviously a burn scar that Hisashi didn't care to hide. But that wasn't what made 𝐀𝐦 so angry. The scar looked as if he was burned then stabbed. The scar had the closing marks of it healing, and that 𝐀𝐦 off more than anything. 𝐀𝐦 lowly gave a hiss as he stared at his best friend. How dare Hisashi stab him? Did that freak run out of ideas of hurting him? Was he not having enough fun? 𝐀𝐦 could honestly believe it. 𝐀𝐦, he needs to tell someone, but kids shouldn't be an adult's business. He's a kid, he needs to know his place. He can't step out of line. Kids need to stay kids, he growled as his hands found their way to his hair, tangling within them as his mind screamed, shut up. He doesn't care anymore. He doesn't. He watched his best friend be hurt too long, and that isn't what a hero does. 𝐀𝐦 wants to be a hero, DMN what Hisashi says. 𝐬𝐻𝐸, 𝐀𝐦 started off in a whisper, while he stared up at his mildly worried and confused friend. I'm gonna tell Mom." Katsuki saw how Izuku gaped and gasped, before he started sputtering out his disagreements. But what about what Dad said? He meant it and I don't want to see you hurt," Izuku murmured with his eyes glossing with fresh tears. Katsuki just scoffed, as he crossed his arms in a sort of defiance. "I was already being hurt before then, right? What's the old me gonna do, huh? I'm telling Mom and that's final." Izuku's shoulders sagged, but he didn't continue to argue. Katsuki counted that as a win, even if he felt a sort of eerie heaviness that has arose in his chest that told him not to tell his mother. That Hisashi would do something more than just hurt him. Katsuki just ignored that feeling. The house was surrounded police tape and flashing police cars. Katsuki could see the heroes and detective alike, stood around speaking amongst each other. It was almost chaotic with the sounds of a blaring ambulance coming to the scene, and Katsuki, he could hear someone as they spoke to a medic, say that they found 2 bodies. Katsuki, he wasn't sure how to react to that news. Inko, she was in there. She was the only other person in there besides the one he killed. Was she dead? Katsuki, he could feel his legs go weak and buck under him at the fleeting thought. Midnight, as she brought him to the chaotic scene, held a hand on his shoulder to keep him grounded. It was bittersweet to him, and hardly giving him a moment's comfort. He wanted to see his aunt, he needed his aunt. But, Katsuki watched as they brought out a body. And that body wasn't the man whose life he took. Even covered in a thin, white sheet, Katsuki knew, that was Midoriya Inko. But, as his eyes refused to tear away from her lifeless body be placed and carried off in the ambulance, he had to ask one of the heroes if that was truly his auntie, that if it was truly his second mother. She's dead. Isn't she? Katsuki spoke out loud, and he didn't know to who, but he got his answer from a closer hero, who must have noticed him and recognized due to how his eyes gave a familiar shine before they dimmed into a regretful grimace while he gave a short pause but solemnly nodded his head. Sorry kid, she took her own life. Katsuki wanted to scream as much as he wanted to break down and cry. He could feel the world around him start to gyrate before his legs completely melt underneath him and the world turned to nothingness. Katsuki heard the screams, he heard the loud screams and wails of his mother crying out for help. He heard the loud crashes and bangs that carried out in the house. He heard the way a person, he doesn't know who, laughed like they were playing some sort of game and kept hurting his mother. And Katsuki, he heard when things went finally stopped. When an eerie, deadly silence took over the home. Katsuki, he wasn't sure if it was safe to leave his room, and he wasn't even sure if he wanted to leave his room. His mom told him to stay there no matter what he heard. To not leave no matter what he saw. Katsuki, he heard a lot, and it scared him. But, right now, Katsuki hearing nothing at all, it scares him more than anything. Where was his mother? Why wasn't she coming up and telling him things were okay? Why is she so quiet now? Is she done fighting or did something happen? Is his mom okay? Katsuki asked himself, but he knew, he didn't have the answers. Not unless he left the safety of the room. Katsuki, he wasn't sure if he was brave enough to do so, he was scared. Scared of what he'll find. He knew, when he went down there, he wouldn't be faced with his mother's smiles and warm hugs. But perhaps a terrifying scene that would make him regret even moving from this spot. Yet, Katsuki couldn't call himself a hero if he can't be brave enough to go see if his mother is okay. He wants to be just like All Might, yet here he is, stuck in his bed, with cold, dried up, tears that stuck and stung his numbing, pink cheeks. He felt weak. And, Katsuki, he hated feeling so useless and helpless. He wanted to go to his mother, and he will. He shouldn't sit around and hope someone will come to him. That isn't what heroes would do, and it isn't what All Might would do. Mama. Please be okay, Katsuki silently prayed, as he eased his way from his bed and out the room door. The hallways were dark and quiet as if no one was even in the house. It worried Katsuki as he trailed his way to the stairs and peered over the railway to see red The little boy covered his mouth in a teary gasp, seeing only a thick crimson pooling liquid spread from the living room. As he carefully, and hesitantly, stalked his way down the stairs, Katsuki saw the laid-out body of his mother. She wasn't moving. She wasn't breathing. She only stared up at him as he grew closer, with her clouded, blank, red eyes that used to be full of life. Full of brightness. Her clothing was ripped and torn that shone off her battered and cut-up body. It left Katsuki feeling sick. His stomach was churning, as if at any moment he was going to throw up. He could feel the hot tears pour in his eyes and freely fall to the ground. His mom was hurt. She was hurt badly. And he only sat in his room waiting for her to come to save him while this happened to her. He felt the crushing guilt that weighed on his shoulders as he halted over Mitsuki's body. She wasn't breathing, she really wasn't breathing. Katsuki didn't want to believe it, but he had to. And he didn't know what to do but to call for help. Katsuki didn't know the numbers by heart for his dad or for Auntie 𝐀𝐦, but he knew how to call the emergency line. Katsuki gave a trembling whimper, as he forced himself to walk away from his mother. He needed to get help. If he get help, things will be okay. Katsuki tried to tell himself, but he couldn't help but to hear Hisashi's sickeningly sweet voice in his head. Kids shouldn't be an adult's business. I have some good news for you, Katsuki-kun. Katsuki glanced up at the hero, Midnight, with a dry, almost frigid, look in his eyes. Over the last couple of days, he was going through the process of being placed in the hero's care rather than thrown away to some shady orphanage. He should be grateful, and to an extent, he was. Midnight has been nothing but patient with him. She's going out of her way to make him feel at home even when that concept to Katsuki isn't a pleasant one. He knew, she was also trying to get his brother in her custody too. Which, he was also grateful for that she was still thinking about Izuku when she didn't have to. Part of Katsuki wanted to say she was doing it for her own motives, that saving not one but two abused kids and one is a quirkless, would make her look good. But whenever he tried to think that thought, she does something to sway his trust a bit. Things such as give him space after the death of 𝐀𝐦 to allow him time to think and process things. She told him, things were moving fast and that he deserves to breath. To be whatever emotions he wants to be, and whether or not Katsuki comes to talk to her now, she'll be there to listen and try her best to help. Katsuki couldn't be mad at her after she said that. Though, it wasn't like Katsuki was practically mad at her before. It was more so a trust issue. A issue of him not understanding her. Why do she care when she doesn't have to? Katsuki often found himself asking. But, after that one talk, he couldn't care to question her. Midnight was genuine, and no matter how illogic it sounds, made it weirder and harder to trust her. Harder to reach out to her. Good news, Katsuki questioned, while she took a seat next to him with a soft smile and a light hum. Yes, your brother is awake. The doctors are allowing us to visit. Would you like to go right now? Katsuki was ready to shout yes as much as he wanted to say no. Izuku, he's missed so much within the last few days. He missed so much good, yet at the same time, so much bad. He has to tell Izuku that 𝐀𝐦 killed herself. That 𝐀𝐦 is really dead this time, that it isn't a sick joke played by Hisashi. He isn't sure how he'll take it, but, Katsuki took in an unstable breath, at least he has the news that they don't ever have to go back to that 𝐓𝐡 excuse of an father, Hisashi. It was both bitter and sweet. Izuku stared out the foggy window that was near his hospital bed. Outside had seemed so far away, to escape seemed so unreal, to be alive even felt unreal. Yet, as he wrapped a tender, and weak, arm around his frame, it was real. And he wasn't sure if he was happy or not. He would eventually be thrown back in the hands of Hisashi to be finished off. And if not the hands of Hisashi, then surely the brutal hands of said Mother Nature would kill him off for the man. But Izuku, he tried not to think like that. He also tried not to remember the fire that nearly killed him, that left him feeling only the pops of his skin that was unnaturally spitting and pulling open from the sheer force of the fire. And with his blood boiling and sizzling underneath the hot, orange, rain. Izuku tried not to remember the loud ringing in his ears just before the warmth, and comforting, blankness that took over his mind. He tried not to remember him accepting the fact if it was truly death. He'd rather be dead than alive. It was better than the hell he suffered while being alive. But, waking up in the hospital, it left a weird sensation of guilt. Of bitterness. And Izuku wasn't sure if the bitterness was resentment of being still here or not. Either way, he hated the negative emotions that took over his heart. "Excuse me, Mr. Midoriya," Izuku gave a cringe at the use of his last name. The name of his father. Though, he chose not to say nothing and instead watched the nurse walk in with a calm smile on her face. "You have visitors, they're outside the door if you're ready," she told him, and he just nodded his head before glancing away. If they were outside the door, he really didn't have a choice if they came in or not. They should have just sent them in his room rather than the nurse, it would have been easier. The nurse just sighed to his actions and left him be, though not before telling whoever was out there to come in. 2 people entered his room, and of those 2 people Izuku was happy to see one of them and mildly confused and wary of why the other was here. "Kaken," Izuku whispered, seeing his brother not hurt and doing okay. Izuku could say he looked better, physically at least, than when he last saw Katsuki. It made Izuku wonder for a moment how the last few days has been treating his brother. He hopes moderately well, and as Izuku traces his green gaze up to the hero who was also standing in the room, he couldn't help but to wonder if she was responsible for helping Katsuki. Though, he couldn't think on that long. Not when Katsuki was quick to throw himself on top of him with a tight and almost crushing hug. Izuku could feel the wetness start to damp his shirt, as his brother clung tighter onto him as if he would disappear if he ever let go. As if this would be their last time ever being able to speak or to see each other again. It made Izuku shakily wrap his own arms around Katsuki, as he laid his chin on top of his fluffy, ashen, hair. "Izuku. Izuku, I'm so sorry," Katsuki gave a broken cry, as his muffled voice kept apologizing for something Izuku didn't know what for. All the green-haired boy could do is try his best to hush Katsuki, and console him like he always did whenever he was hurt. "Kaken, you have to speak to me, tell me what happened," Izuku softly asked as Katsuki only let out a weak, and even more broken cry that bordered a sob. It hurt seeing Katsuki like this, especially when he didn't know what to do. Izuku decided to take the risk of giving an asking look to the hero who gave a dour smile. "Your mother. She was found dead. We don't know much details besides she took her own life." Oh, Izuku thought as he frowned, unsure how to react. How to even feel. He knew, at the moment, he should have more emotions than just numbness. Than just pure nothingness and almost a thankfulness that she was finally gone. Izuku felt horrible almost as quickly he did horrified for that. It wasn't as if he didn't love his mother, he did. But the very thought that she's dead and finally gone. That she's out of this mess and not Hisashi's plaything. Left him weirdly happy the more he thought about it. He really was a monster. He can't even be properly sad over his mother's death. He was happy she was gone. What type of freak is he? After all 𝐀𝐦 done for him, he just... Izuku let out a choking sob, as he hid his face. He felt his lungs constrict as his breath slowly slipped away from him, leaving his head throbbing from the lack of air. He was a monster, he was AF monster. Just like his father. Izuku could hear the voice whisper ever so sweetly and carelessly before quietly laughing at him in nothing but pure mockery. Maybe it was just Izuku finally going fully insane, or maybe Izuku, he just was so DMN high off of what bullshit medicine the doctors was giving him, but Izuku could only let out a quiet and weak, watery laugh that was full of hysteria. It almost sounded as crazed as the passing voices in his head that wouldn't shut up. Izuku, he couldn't help but to curl into himself. He snatched away from Katsuki who watched him act out in concern. It was fine, Izuku would also be worried. He wasn't okay mentally, emotionally, or even physically at the moment. But, as he shut his eyes and let out a shuddering breath, he hoped at some point at least one of those things will be okay. "Little Katsuki here is gonna be living with us for now on," Hisashi said with a grin, as he gave a gentle pat on Katsuki's back. The ashen-haired boy recoiled his body away from the man and was quick to run to Izuku's side. Hisashi frowned, but didn't comment on it. After all, his deep brown eyes said it all. He won't let Katsuki think he could just do what he like. Izuku didn't like that look in his father's eyes. He knew, later on will be absolute hell for him. And not just him now, for his best friend turned brother, Katsuki. Izuku knew, Hisashi did something to his auntie Mitsuki. He heard the threat he told Katsuki, even in his dazed stupor. He knew his father killed her. That was a strong pill to swallow, to even think about. No matter how bad of a man Hisashi was. Izuku refused to think he'd go so far to kill someone. It was just so villainous. His father. He was a villain, and Izuku, who wanted to be a hero so badly, didn't know how to stop him. Okay then, boys. Run off and play since you're in such a hurry. Go on now. There was a subtle threat that Izuku learned early on to pick up on. He was quick to take Katsuki's arms and run. He ran far from his father and ran until they got to his room. He didn't feel safe until he shut his door and locked it. And even then, he knew, his father could get to him. Izuku, for once, he didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a useless rock, that was just waiting to crushed into nothing but dust. Midnight was a nice person, Izuku was quick to learn. She was patient, she was adaptable, and she was the one to help him and Katsuki in the dead of the night when he was hurt. She also went as far as to put them in her custody for now. Izuku wasn't sure what was going to happen later on, but Izuku learned to not question the true good things that happens for you. Izuku-kun, how are you doing? I know things might be a sudden. Izuku saw Midnight make her way into his room, to only stop at the entrance of the door with a questioning expression in her blue eyes. Izuku knew Midnight was silently asking to come in, which he liked about the hero. She respected his privacy, despite how her hero persona was. In fact, Izuku could say her daily hero persona compared to how he's seen her act was toned down a lot. She was a little more reversed, though she still didn't have much a filter. She just less R-rated and more friendly for others. It was something Izuku also had liked about her, and made him wonder what else was different about the hero out of costume. He knew, he had a lot of time to figure it out, and shouldn't be worried about that of all things. But the small heroic nerd in him couldn't help but to be curious. I'm okay. I think. I mean, better than in hospital. So that's good, Izuku honestly answered, as he watched as Midnight came into the room and take a seat on the bed. She gave a soft hum and a nod of her head to this. Then, tell me, what were you feeling in the hospital? Izuku wanted to snort at her question. What was this? Therapy. Though, he didn't. Instead, he actually thought on the question. And let the words flow out of his mouth without any true feelings of consequences. Like a monster. I didn't feel sad for her death, but happy. I mean, she's free now, Miss Kayama. So should I really cry and beg for whoever will listen back to this hell? It would be wrong. But it's wrong for me not to be sad. So why? Why am I not sad? Izuku's voice quivered, as his vision blurred with cloudy tears. Izuku didn't want to cry. Izuku was so tired of crying, yet he couldn't help how a wail broke free from his lips as he fell over onto Midnight's lap. The heroine didn't shove him away, nor did she look down at him in disgust. No, instead, he felt her fingers curl through his hair as she softly shushed him with her quiet hums and murmurs. It's okay to be happy, Izuku. Knowing your mother is free from whatever you all been through can be a happy feeling. It doesn't make you a monster for that. I think it makes you human. And humans grieve in different ways. Midnight said quietly, while she in a swift and gentle motion, brushed her thumb across his wet cheek, wiping off stray tears. Izuku glanced up at her after she did so, and she gave a tender look with a smile that made the pain ease if only slightly. You might feel sad later. You might cry more later. You don't know, but it's fine if you don't. As long as you don't hold in what you feel because you think it's bad. No one can tell you how to feel, and if it's wrong, okay. Izuku slowly nodded his head, while Midnight smiled bigger and gave his hair a quick ruffle. "Good, I'll leave you alone for now. But just know, if you need anything, please ask me. I'll do my best to help you 𝐬𝐿. After that exchange, Midnight left him to his own thoughts. Though, 𝐬𝐿 couldn't say it was a bad thing. He felt a bit lighter. A bit happier. 𝐬𝐿, he wouldn't say he was good or dare say he was okay. But he didn't feel as horrible as before. Talking with the hero did help him. Late that night, 𝐬𝐿 found himself in the comfort of Katsuki's bed, rather than his own. 𝐬𝐿 tried to fall asleep once again, but every time he does, all he can see is nightmare after nightmare. Some of the nightmares were of Katsuki dying in front of 𝐬𝐿 and 𝐬𝐿 not being there to save him. Some were of him dying, and Katsuki crying over his body. Some were him seeing 𝐴𝐻𝐬 die repeatedly and all blaming him for her death. And some of 𝐬𝐿 getting beaten, burned, and being forcefully buried alive. Yeah, 𝐬𝐿 couldn't sleep after those nightmares. But at least he was in the comfort of Katsuki, who was also awake for the same reasons as him. "Hey Zoo." Katsuki called out to him, and 𝐬𝐿 gave a quiet hum as an answer. He could see how his brother gave a falter, as he wanted to talk about something, yet that something was strong to speak up about. 𝐬𝐿 didn't want him to force himself, but Katsuki pressed on after a few long seconds with a tenseness pressuring in the air. "I keep seeing the body. 𝐬𝐿, I keep seeing the body of someone I actually killed." Katsuki choked on his words, as if they refused to come out. 𝐬𝐿 could only stare in a stunned silence at this news. He wanted to ask when Katsuki had took someone's life, but his tongue felt heavy like lead. It refused to move or even make a single sound. "You were hurt, Hisashi nearly killed you and his men, and oh my god, I actually killed someone." 𝐬𝐿. "I didn't care about it either." Katsuki laughed as his laughter started to soon break into a cry while he buried his face into the pillow. His sobs were suppressed, but 𝐬𝐿 could clearly how lost and hurt they sounded. How the guilt started to bubble its way through the cracks of it. 𝐬𝐿 could see how the way Katsuki's shoulders gave a shake when another sob traveled through him while he was muttering incoherent words by this point. 𝐬𝐿 frowned at this. He didn't know what happened that led Katsuki to do what he did. But he didn't see his brother any less heroic. He knew that Katsuki had his reasons, whether or not he tells him now or later. "Katsuki," 𝐬𝐿 whispered, as he placed a hand on top of his quivering body, "it's okay, we'll be okay. I trust you. I trust your decisions. If that man had to die, he had to die." Katsuki didn't give him a true response. Instead, he sniffled and gave a weak head shake to show at least he heard what 𝐬𝐿 said. 𝐬𝐿, at this point, think they should get help. Some serious help. Maybe. Just maybe they can trust Midnight to help rather than betray them. He'll have to talk to Katsuki later on when the teen is in a much better headspace. For now though, he rubbed the crying boy on his back to give him comfort. "Do you trust Miss Kayama?" 𝐬𝐿 had asked, one morning when him and his brother was alone. 𝐬𝐿 could see the blanch and bristle that Katsuki did from his sudden question. 𝐬𝐿 didn't blame him, they were having a quiet moment not too long ago. Not worried about life or what was or wasn't going to happen to them yet. 𝐬𝐿 ruined the moment. But he couldn't help it. The question has been floating in his head for the longest time. 𝐬𝐿, he for one, wasn't sure if he fully trusted the hero. It was terrifying to put his trust into someone again. Not for the fact they can harm him, but the fact every person he grew attached to and loved he lost. He doesn't want to lose Midnight, and maybe that's a selfish thought, but 𝐬𝐿 truly doesn't want to lose her. Midnight, she helped him and Katsuki so much that it's strong for him not to hold close to her and hope she doesn't disappear. And that thought, these new feelings, scare 𝐬𝐿 more than being hurt again. "I don't know," Katsuki answered in a low tone and with his head hung down, staring at the ground. 𝐬𝐿 gave a nod, as he trailed his gaze to the wall. Should we try to trust her?" 𝐬𝐿 asked, his voice trembling at the thought of letting her in. But, he knew, to receive help, he has to reach back and fully open his heart to the hero. He has to be ready to accept it. Even if he isn't completely ready. He wants to try. He wants to try to move on from the horrible past of theirs, and walk a new future. But Izuku, he doesn't want to do it alone. If Katsuki says no, then he'll listen. And, maybe, it's not particularly healthy to do so and be so dependent on another person. But, then again, when has Izuku ever done something that was healthy for himself? Maybe. Yes, I don't know. She's been nothing but helpful to the two of us and him just. So unsure if she's not like, Katsuki sunk further into the couch, as he brought his hand over his face, running it down. I feel horrible but I'm scared Izuku. I don't want to be alone again, Katsuki admitted and Izuku was quick to pull his brother in a hug. Izuku understood really he did. Izuku didn't want to be alone either. Izuku didn't want to lose anyone he cared about again. He just wanted things to be better. And, he just thought, for once letting another adult in who seemed like they gave a SHT for 2 seconds, would help them. That it would be better. Maybe it will crush them in the end. Maybe she won't be good for them. He doesn't know, he can't predict the future like Sir Night-Eye. He was purely going off of his gut feelings. And maybe, that was the wrong way to go. But, he didn't know what else to do. Izuku hated just waking up every day, feeling neither dead nor alive. Instead, feeling like he was stuck in a void and that void was purgatory. He didn't like it. He hated it so much. He remembered, when they had dreams of being a hero. Of doing so much in life that their little hearts could explode with ambitions. Somewhere down the road, dreams had died and their hearts once filled with ambition, was filled with nothing but bitter indignation. He wants to bring back the bright, almost naive, dreams. Though, deep down, Izuku knows, that child-like innocence won't ever come back. But at least, he can try and hope. It's okay if you're not ready. One day we'll both take the first step to be fully ready. I'll wait for you, Kaken. Izuku pulled away from his brother, with a small smile gracing his lips as he placed out his pinky. Brothers forever, Izuku said while Katsuki chuckled, but hooked their pinkies together in a tight promise. Brothers forever, Deku. Kaken. Kaken. Can we make a promise? Izuku whispered with an excited-filled voice, as he huddled closely to Katsuki. Right now, he technically wasn't supposed to be out of his room, it was late at night and he was supposed to be sleeping. But, Izuku, he wanted to be with his best friend, his brother. A promise? Katsuki asked, as Izuku gave a soft hum while he grinned and held out his pinky. You can't break it. It's forever. Warily, the other boy looked at him, but he gave a nod of his head and interlocked their two pinkies together. No matter what happens between us. We'll always be brothers, Izuku says, as Katsuki grinned to this and he gave a small shake to their hand. No matter what, we will be brothers forever, Izuku. Katsuki promised, and, he meant the promise. After all, nothing can come between the two of them.